Hello and welcome to Millennium News Hour. I am Tanziba Naurin. In today's bulletin, we will present top and trending news from across the nation and the world. Let's begin with the headlines of the day. Biden hosts GOP Dem governors at White House for dinner. US holds drills in South China Sea amid tensions with China. Rihanna shines in singular Super Bowl halftime show. U-Haul hits injures 8 pedestrians in New York City, 2 critical. First infant in Kentucky surrendered anonymously at baby box. Rosalind Pope, author of Appeal for Human Rights, dies at 84. Arrests made in Louisiana mass shooting that wounded 12. Turkey earthquake survivors seek hot meals as rescues win. Trudeau said US fighters shot down object over northern Canada. China says more than 10 US balloons flew in its airspace. UK to review security after unknown objects puzzle North America. NATO chief says Ukraine's ammunition use outstripping supply. Netanyahu launches contentious overhaul as thousands protest. Iran releases filmmaker held for 6 months over criticism. Iranian President Raisi to visit China to shore up ties. Mahomes Chiefs beat Eagles 38-35 in Super Bowl 57. Questionable lit flag takes drama out of Super Bowl ending. And Hamlin makes appearance on field at Super Bowl. Now news in detail. President Joe Biden hosted both Republican and Democratic governors for a black tie affair at the White House, raised his glass for a toast. Standing under a portrait of Abraham Lincoln, he told the people in the room to remember who they were. We are the United States of America. We can get big things done if we do it together. Cheers, the crowd replied, as the clink of glasses rippled about the state dining room. Biden hosted the dinner for members of the National Governors Association at the White House for the first time in his administration. It's usually a tradition, but the dinner was held last year at Mount Vernon, George Washington's Virginia State, and virtually in 2021 because of COVID-19. The dinner came as federal leaders seemed as divided as ever, with the new Republican majority in the House courting a risky debt-ceiling showdown. On Saturday at the White House, though, the message was togetherness, and not just because the room was tightly packed with governors, spouses, and cabinet members. Biden and both associations' leaders, Republican Governor Spencer Cox of Utah and Democratic Governor Phil Murphy of New Jersey, spoke about the need to put aside the increasingly rancorous political differences in order to work together to better the nation. The United States Navy and Marine Corps are holding joint exercises in the South China Sea at a time of heightened tensions with Beijing over the shooting down of a suspected Chinese spy balloon. The 7th Fleet based in Japan said Sunday that the USS Nimitz aircraft carrier strike group and the 13th Marine Expeditionary Unit have been conducting integrated expeditionary strike force operations in the South China Sea. It said exercises involving ships, ground forces and aircraft took place Saturday but gave no details on when they began or whether they had ended. China claims virtually the entire South China Sea and strongly objects to military activity by other nations in the contested waterway through which 5 trillion in goods are shipped every year. The US takes no official position on sovereignty in the South China Sea, but maintains that freedom of navigation and overflight must be preserved. Several times a year, it sends ships sailing past fortified Chinese outposts in the Spratly Islands, prompting protests from Beijing. The US has also been strengthening its defense alliance with the Philippines, which has faced encroachment on islands and fisheries by the Chinese Coast Guard and nominally civilian but government-backed fleets. Rihanna threw out all the conventions of the typical Super Bowl halftime show and turned entertainment's largest platform into something all her own. And she did it while also revealing that she is pregnant with her second child. More an avant-garde dance piece than a concert, the Barbadian superstar, dressed in a bright red jumpsuit, plowed through 12 of her hits in 13 minutes, surrounded by dozens of androgynous dancers dressed in white, who mirrored nearly every move she made on and off the giant stage at a State Farm Stadium in Glendale, Arizona. In case anyone was confused, this was all about Rihanna. No special guests, no breaks, no momentum shifts. From her start on a platform suspended above the stage to powerfully belting out the inspirational diamonds, she kept a tight grip on everyone's attention by performing one smash hit after another. From Work to Umbrella, it was fully her vision, polished yet playful, and completely self-assured. She didn't throw in any ballads to show off the power of her voice because she doesn't need to prove herself to anyone. And she didn't need to say anything beyond "Thank you, Arizona" to make her points. It was all an unconventional extension of what was an unconventional decision to perform at this particular time. A man driving a U-Haul truck struck and injured several pedestrians in New York City on Monday before police were able to pin the careening vehicle against a building following a miles-long pursuit through Brooklyn. At least 8 people were hurt at 2 locations, including 2 people who were in critical condition, the New York City Fire Department said in an email. The truck sped through the Bay Ridge neighborhood of Brooklyn, hitting people on a sidewalk at one point, before police stopped it more than 3 miles away near the entrance to a tunnel leading from Brooklyn to Manhattan. Aerial video from news helicopters showed the truck on a sidewalk, its path blocked by a police cruiser. Authorities were examining the truck to make sure it didn't contain explosives. A spokesperson for New York City Mayor Eric Adams said a suspect was in custody. Kentucky has seen its first infant anonymously dropped off at one of its baby box safe surrender locations. At a news conference Friday, Safe Haven Baby Box's founder and CEO Monica Kelsey said the child was dropped off within the last 7 days at a Bowling Green Fire Department location. declining to be more specific to protect anonymity. She said fire department staff was able to tend to the child in less than 90 seconds. The child is the 24th in the country to be surrendered at one of more than 130 baby boxes and drawers the organization has established across 9 states. This baby is healthy, this baby is beautiful, this baby is perfect, said Kelsey, who added that officials are now looking to place the child in a forever home. Governor Andy Beshear signed a law in 2021 that allows the use of baby boxes for children less than 30 days old. The law requires the boxes to be located at police stations, fire stations, or hospitals that are staffed 24 hours a day. It also requires equipping them with a notification system to alert the first responders on site that a child has been placed inside the box. Rosalind Pope, a college professor and musician who wrote an appeal for human rights, laying out the reasons for the Atlanta student movement against systematic racism in 1960, has died. She was 84. Pope died January 18 in Arlington, Texas, where she moved from Atlanta to be with her daughters after her health began to fail in 2021, according to her family's obituary. The document Pope wrote as a 21-year-old senior at Spelman College launched a nonviolent campaign of boycotts and sit-ins by black college students protesting discrimination not just in voting but in education, jobs, housing, hospitals, movies, concerts, restaurants, and law enforcement. Police in Louisiana's capital city have arrested 2 people for a mass shooting that left 12 others wounded at a nightclub in January. 2 19-year-olds, Nikhil Franklin and Jay-Sean Jackson, were arrested Friday, the Baton Rouge Police Department said. Franklin was charged with 12 counts of attempted first-degree murder, while Jackson was charged with 12 counts of principal to attempted first-degree murder. On January 22, shots rang out around 1:30 a.m. in the Dare Bar and Lounge in Baton Rouge. A dozen people were injured and most sustained non-life-threatening injuries. 3 victims were initially listed in critical condition, but their conditions later improved. Police said they believe the shooting was not a random act of violence and that it was targeted. Sergeant L. Gene McNeely Jr., a police spokesman, told the Associated Press in the days following the shooting that investigators believed the shooting was targeted at one partygoer and that bystanders were hurt in the process. Now it's time for global updates. Thousands left homeless by a massive earthquake that struck Turkey and Syria a week ago, packed into crowded tents or lined up in the streets Monday for hot meals as the desperate search for survivors entered what was likely its last hours. Thousands of rescue teams, including Turkish coal miners and experts aided by sniffer dogs and thermal cameras, were searching pulverized apartment blocks for signs of life. In southern Hatay province, rescuers cheered and clapped as a 13-year-old boy identified only by his first name, Khan, was pulled from the rubble. Stories of near-miraculous rescues have flooded the airwaves in recent days, including many that were broadcast live on Turkish television and beamed around the world. But tens of thousands of dead have been found during the same period. Experts say the window for such rescues has nearly closed, given that temperatures have fallen to -6 degrees Celsius and the total collapse of so many buildings. The 7.8 magnitude earthquake and its aftershocks, including a major one 9 hours after the initial tremor, struck southeastern Turkey and northern Syria on February 6, reducing huge swaths of towns and cities to fragments of concrete and twisted metal. The death toll has surpassed 35,000. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said Saturday that on his order, a US fighter jet shot down an unidentified object that was flying high over the Yukon, acting a day after the US took similar action over Alaska. North American Aerospace Defense Command, the combined US-Canada organization that provides shared defense of airspace over the two nations, detected the object flying at a high altitude Friday evening over Alaska, US officials said. It crossed into Canadian airspace on Saturday. Trudeau spoke with President Joe Biden, who also ordered the object to be shot down. Canadian and US jets operating as part of NORAD were scrambled, and it was a US jet that shot down the object. Canadian Defense Minister Anita Anand told a news conference in Ottawa that the object, flying at around 40,000 feet, had been shot down at 3:41 p.m. EST, approximately 100 miles from the Canada-US border in the central Yukon. A recovery operation was underway involving the Canadian Armed Forces and the RCMP. Hours later in the US, the Federal Aviation Administration said Saturday night it had closed some airspace in Montana to support Defense Department activities. NORAD later said the closure, which lasted a little more than an hour, came after it had detected a radar anomaly and sent fighter aircraft to investigate. The aircraft did not identify any object to correlate to the radar hits, NORAD said. China on Monday said more than 10 US high-altitude balloons have flown in its airspace during the past year without its permission, following Washington's accusation that Beijing operates a fleet of surveillance balloons around the world. The United States denied that it operates any surveillance balloons over China. The Chinese allegation came after the US shot down a suspected Chinese spy balloon that had crossed from Alaska to South Carolina, sparking a new crisis in bilateral relations that have spiraled to their lowest level in decades. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin gave no details about the alleged US balloons, how they had been dealt with, or whether they had government or military links. It is also common for US balloons to illegally enter the airspace of other countries, Wang said at a daily briefing. Since last year, US high-altitude balloons have illegally flown over China's airspace more than 10 times without the approval of Chinese authorities. Wang said the US should first reflect on itself and change course rather than smear and instigate a confrontation. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said Monday that the government would do whatever it takes to protect the country as the UK announced a security review after several unidentified objects were shot down in the skies over North America. Asked about the objects, Sunak said he wouldn't comment in detail on security matters, but people should be reassured that we have all the capabilities in place to keep the country safe, including a quick reaction force of Typhoon fighter jets. Defense Secretary Ben Wallace said the UK and her allies will review what these airspace intrusions mean for our security. He said this development is another sign of how the global threat picture is changing for the orbs. US fighter jets shot down an object over Lake Huron on Sunday, the fourth such downing over the US or Canada this month. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg warned Monday that Ukraine is using up ammunition far faster than its allies can provide it and putting pressure on Western defense industries, just as Russia ramps up its military offensive. The war in Ukraine is consuming an enormous amount of munitions and depleting allied stockpiles, Stoltenberg said. The current rate of Ukraine's ammunition expenditure is many times higher than our current rate of production. This puts our defense industries under strain. According to some estimates, Ukraine is firing up to 6,000 to 7,000 artillery shells each day, around a third of the daily amount that Russia is using almost 1 year into the war. Speaking on the eve of a two-day meeting of NATO defense ministers, Stoltenberg said the waiting time for the supply of large-caliber ammunition has increased from 12 to 28 months, and that orders placed today would only be delivered 2.5 years later. The former Norwegian Prime Minister said the President Vladimir Putin has already begun Russia's long-anticipated spring military offensive in Ukraine. So we must continue to provide Ukraine with what it needs to win and to achieve a just and sustainable peace. Tens of thousands of Israelis hoisting flags, blowing on horns, and chanting democracy and no to dictatorship protested outside the parliament building Monday as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government formally launched a contentious plan to overhaul the country's legal system. It was the largest protest outside the Knesset in years and reflected the deep divisions over the plan. The proposed changes have triggered weeks of mass demonstrations, drawn cries of protest from influential business leaders and former military men, and even prompted a statement of concern from President Joe Biden. Despite a plea from the nation's figurehead president to put the legislation on hold, Netanyahu's allies approved a series of legislative changes during a stormy committee meeting Monday. The vote now sends the legislation to the full parliament for a series of votes, an opening salvo in a battle expected to stretch on for weeks. Iran has released an award-winning filmmaker more than 6 months after arresting him for criticizing the government, a pro-reform newspaper reported Monday. Mohammad Rasulov, whose 2020 film There Is No Evil won the top prize at the Berlin International Film Festival, is one of several prominent artists, athletes, and other celebrities detained in recent months for criticizing authorities. He was arrested in July for criticizing the government's crackdown on protests in the southwestern city of Abadan over a deadly building collapse. 2 months later, nationwide protests broke out after a 22-year-old woman died in the custody of the country's morality police. The Sharq newspaper, which is associated with the country's reform movement, said Rasulov had recently been furloughed from prison and was formally released, without specifying the dates or providing further information. There was no official comment. Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi will meet with his counterpart Xi Jinping during his 3-day trip in China starting Tuesday, as the two US rivals seek further cooperation. China's Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Hua Chunying made the announcement Sunday, saying Raisi's visit was at Xi's invitation. Raisi will meet with Xi and their delegations will sign cooperation documents, according to Iran's state news agency IRNA. Meeting with Iranian and Chinese business leaders and Iranian expatriates in China is also part of his itinerary, the report added. Raisi's visit is expected to deepen ties between the two political and economic partners that are opposed to the US-led Western domination of international affairs. The two leaders met last September in Samarkand, Uzbekistan, when Xi underscored China's support for Iran. Now it's time for business news. Today's New York stock close price is 16,032.74. The NYSE composite is increased by 122.05 points or 0.77%. Tokyo stock close price is 27,427.32. The Nikkei 225 index is decreased by 243.66 points or 0.88%. Shanghai stock close price is 3,284.1599. The Shanghai Composite Index is increased by 23.49 points or 0.72%. Hong Kong stock close price is 21,164.42. The Hang Seng Index is decreased by 26 points or 0.12%. Bombay stock close price is 60,431.84. The Sensex Index is decreased by 250.86 points or 0.41%. Let's have a look on today's sports stories. Patrick Mahomes was magical when the Kansas City Chiefs desperately needed him to pull off another Super Bowl comeback. Playing on an injured ankle, Mahomes threw two touchdown passes in the fourth quarter and scrambled 26 yards on the go-ahead drive before Harrison Butker kicked a 27-yard field goal with 8 seconds left to give the Chiefs a 38-35 victory over the Philadelphia Eagles on Sunday night. The Chiefs own their second NFL title in 4 years, and two-time NFL MVP Mahomes earned his second Super Bowl MVP award. A questionable late penalty on Philadelphia Eagles cornerback James Bradberry with less than 2 minutes remaining meant that a scintillating Super Bowl 57 had a bit of an underwhelming finish. Kansas City won its second Super Bowl in 4 years by beating the Eagles 38-35 on Sunday in Glendale, Arizona. It was an exciting back-and-forth game that saw the Chiefs claw back from a 10-point halftime deficit. One of the few gripes for football fans, particularly Eagles fans, was the anticlimactic ending. The Chiefs were driving and faced 3rd and 8 at the Eagles' 15-yard line with 1 minute 54 seconds remaining when Kansas City quarterback Patrick Mahomes threw incomplete to Juju Smith-Schuster. But officials flagged Bradberry for defensive holding, which negated the incompetition and, more importantly, gave the Chiefs a first down. Replays showed that Bradberry made light contact with Smith-Schuster, though it didn't appear to affect the play much. Many fans and some football commentators disagreed with the call. Former NFL tight end Greg Olsen wasn't happy with the decision on the Fox broadcast and ESPN, and Amazon analyst Kirk Herbstreit was also critical on social media. The only person who didn't seem upset with the call was Bradberry himself. Damar Hamlin has made it to the Super Bowl. The Buffalo Bills safety made his third appearance in Phoenix during Super Bowl week, this time on the field at State Farm Stadium prior to Sunday's game between the Kansas City Chiefs and Philadelphia Eagles. It's been a little more than a month since Hamlin went into cardiac arrest and needed to be resuscitated on the field in Cincinnati. Sunday's appearance was another milestone in his remarkable recovery. "I am allowing that to be in God's hands," Hamlin said in an interview with Fox's Michael Strahan. "I'm just thankful he gave me a second chance." During the pre-game pageantry, the NFL honored the Bills and Cincinnati Bengals training and medical staffs, along with the staff at the University of Cincinnati Medical Center. A minute later, Hamlin joined them, putting his hands together to form a hug. He also received hugs from several of the first responders. He also appeared on stage at NFL Honors on Thursday night. Let's have a look on today's weather forecast. That's all in today's news. Keep watching Millennium News 24 for latest updates. Millennium TV USA and Millennium News 24 network is transmitted and available to be watched free for all TVs such as Sony, Samsung, LG, Roku TV, Amazon TV and Apple TV. And also in all European countries and Australia available with the Sky Network, Worldwide Jadoo TV, Radiant IPTV, Worldwide Jago BD Network and Horizon Satellite globally. Stay connected with us for all types of informative and entertainment programs. Thank you.